Hi everyone, my name is Natalie. So today I'm going to do a TBR update and book haul for the third quarter of this year. So I will link the previous quarters that I've done updates like this in the description below. Basically this year one of my reading goals was to decrease my TBR and to buy less books, and I'm using these videos to track that, but most of the time they just become book hauls. But I thought that I would start this video by giving you some stats. So I started this year with 451 unread books. At this time I have 426 unread books on my shelves, so I've decreased it about 25 books, which isn't a lot obviously, but I have continued to buy new books and I have unhauled a few books, so the progress is in the right direction, and I think more importantly for me, I'm trying to adapt how I'm buying books, how I'm adding books, and what books I'm adding, so that the unhauling doesn't have to happen as much. Which, I mean, it's always a process. What you read and what you're interested in reading, that's always going to evolve. But I do feel like I am becoming more aware with what books I need to buy and to own in my physical library and collection, and what books I could as easily just borrow from my library. So that was the long-winded introduction to this video. So I will start with showing you briefly the books that I have read from my physical TBR. So we have this pile that I've already talked about in wrap-ups. So I think, let's see, I have a few of these books that I've actually bought as well in the same period. So we have On Contemporary Art by Caesar Era, which I've talked about in my August wrap-up. We have Family Lexicon by Natalia Ginsburg. I bought this also particularly to read it as a buddy read in August for Women in Translation Month. I bought The Cost of Living as soon as I read Things I Don't Want to Know, so both of these were also summer purchases. So those I've talked about in my June, July, or August wrap-ups, so those will also be linked in the description. The rest of the books that I've read from my physical TBR are books that I've read in September. So we have we have this pile, which I will talk about very soon in my September wrap-up that I haven't filmed yet, but that is coming in the next week. And yeah, I've been reading quite a lot of books from my shelves. This pile is a lot of Shorty September books, which has helped in getting to some of the books that I just never get around to, even though they are short and don't take much time at all to read. And also one of the factors to me actually reading quite a few books from my TBR over the summer is that I didn't have a library card. Because my library card had expired and I had to go into the central library, I didn't get around to it until September, I want to say, in the beginning of September, early or late August. So that allowed me to focus on my own books, which I think was a good thing, because now I'm back in the swing of things with the library and having quite a lot of library books out. Then we have the book haul section of this video. So first I'm going to briefly talk about the books that I am currently reading. So I've started all of these books and have also bought them in the last few months. So we have Their Plan Eyes, A Personal and Cultural History of Blindness by M. Leona Godden, which I've talked about in a currently reading video sometime during this period, and I have read about 2/3 of it. So it just hasn't been a priority of all of the various things that I've been reading. But I have really enjoyed the discussion in this. It talks about blindness from literary history, from cultural representation, from societal development, from the scientific view on vision and sight. So many different perspectives comes together in this discussion. I have finally got my hands on Braiding Sweetgrass, Indigenous Wisdom, Scientific Knowledge, and the Teachings of Plants by Robin Wall Kimmerer. I had been meaning to get this one for ages and finally got around to buying it in September and have just started listening to the audiobook, so I haven't made much progress into it yet. But I think there's a reason that this one is such a popular natural history, nature writing type book. The core values that Robin Wall Kimmerer tries to convey is things that I feel very that I feel very connected with. How human and nature relationships can look, how they can work and be a positive force. I feel like there's so much wisdom in this book, and I'm looking forward to continuing on with this. A book that I have only just dipped my toe into is A Line Made by Walking by Sarah Baum. I got this from one of my local thrift stores, and it seemed like an autumn-like book, so I decided to start it immediately when I got it. But it hasn't been, again, a priority, and it doesn't help that it is a hardcover, which means that it gets lower in my priority when I need to have a book on the go. But I have enjoyed the sort of the beginning of this story, which is about a woman who lives in an urban area but moves to a more rural area and has a particular connection with nature and with the animals around her, which so far I'm finding it interesting, definitely, but I haven't read enough to have a firm opinion yet. And then we have one of my main current reads at the moment, and that is De kommer att drunkna I sina mödrars tårar or They Will Drown in Their Mother's Tears by Johannes Anjuru. I'm currently reading this for Invisible Cities project. And then the last one that I have started of the books that I bought in the recent months is this book that I don't know what the English title for this is. I think it has been translated into English as well. The original is German, and it is Diaries from Viktor Klemperer from 1933 to 1945, chronicling the Second World War. And the writer himself was Jewish, but he managed somehow to get away from a lot of the worst horrors of the Holocaust. But the diaries themselves chronicle everything from the big events of the time, as well as the more minor and mundane aspects of living through this war period. And I went to a exhibition in my art museum in September, and the exhibition was about the 20s and 30s, and the interwar years, as well as, of course, the Second World War. And this was one of the books that they had put up in the museum store as recommendations related to the time period. Reading diaries and reading letters is something that I'm growing to really enjoy as a writing form, as a reading experience. With all of the various intricacies of every day that just comes up in those types of writing. And then we have a few books that I haven't even gotten around to starting yet, that I've bought between July and September. We have a fairly recent release. This is Inifrån Sápmi, Vittnesmål från stulet land, edited by Patricia Fjällgren and Malin Nord. This is an anthology of Sami writers, writing essays on being Sami and Sami history and culture. So Sami is an indigenous group in Sweden. Either there's been more Sami writers finally becoming published, or I'm just more aware of them. I think it might be a little bit of both. But this anthology, I think, will be a fantastic way for me to explore new writers that I hadn't heard of. Next, we have a few books that I bought for planned buddy reads. So we have What Are You Going Through by Sigrid Nunes. I am planning to buddy read this with Roxy from Chaotic Bibliophile. I will link her in the description below. So I read The Friend by Sigrid Nunes in 2019, I think, and it was one of my favorite books of that year. I didn't think I would love it that much. I had heard a lot about it and was curious because of the dog on the cover. Even though I actually tend to avoid books with anything to do with dogs because nothing good happens to dogs in books. But I was intrigued and tried it, and for some reason or another, I connected with Nuna's way of writing. And so after that, I've been meaning to get to more of her books. This one I will be reading very soon with Roxy. And then we have also talked about reading Shirley Jackson's memoirs together. I am actually planning to do a bit of a Shirley Jackson project. I'll talk more about that in a future video. But these are the two Shirley Jackson memoirs that I have now added to my Shirley Jackson collection. I think I'm missing her children's book and a few of the short stories that I don't have in the collections I do own. We have Life Among the Savages and Raising Demons. So hopefully I will be reading both of these in the near future. Next we have a book that I plan to read in September for Palestine for Invisible Cities. I didn't get around to it, but I will definitely try to read it soon anyway, and that is Out of Place by Edward Said. And I read Edward Said's Orientalism for my studies, and I found it such a valuable and such an important book for my studies and for sort of changing my way of thinking of the world as well. And I feel like a lot of the tools that I got out of it has stayed with me in how I approach various topics, and therefore I really wanted to learn more about him. So when I heard that this memoir was a thing, I pretty much immediately bought it. Next we have another Swedish book. This is Memoirs by Beppe Wolgers. So this is a collection of his memoirs. I don't think it's the full collection. Beppe Wolgers is the man who played Pippi Longström's father in the movies from the 70s, I think. The movies are from the 70s, right? He was an actor. He was also a songwriter, so he wrote most of my favorite Monica Zetterlund songs. And he had his own TV show. He did so many various things related to being a performer and being a creator. And I just find him a really interesting person. But since hearing about his songwriting particularly, I was more interested in learning about his life. Next is another memoir, and this is Real Estate by Deborah Levy. So as I said, I read Things I Don't Want to Know and Cost of Living earlier this year. Both of them were great. Cost of Living was absolutely fantastic. This is the third in her living autobiography trilogy. And yeah, I'm looking forward to reading it, although I'm a little bit sad that this is the third, and as I understand it, it is the final book in her living autobiography. As I mentioned with when I talked about Cost of Living, there's something very comforting about reading her. She's such a warm writer to me. I will link the video where I talked about Cost of Living more if you're curious, but I expect that I will really enjoy this, if not love it. So that is the look of the third quarter of 2021. I would love to know if you've read any of these books, if you would like to read any of them. If you have any other thoughts related to these books or related to TBRs and having them and the size of TBRs, and if you have a TBR related goal this year, how that is going, I would love to chat with you in the comments. I hope you're doing well and you're taking care of yourselves, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.